Just gotta type something out. On this week's episode, Solo and the shaky future of the Star Wars anthology. How to grill some awesome kebabs, and the rise and fall of Cliffy B. On this week's episode, Solo and the shaky future of the Star Wars anthology. How to grill some awesome kebabs, and the rise and fall of Cliffy B. All this and more as we once again delve into the pop culture cosmos. The pop culture cosmos. Yes, and we're back for another episode of the Pop Culture Cosmos. My name is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source. We thank you for tuning in each and every week to all of our great shows. But it wouldn't be a Pop Culture Cosmos without my good friend. He is the man, the myth, and the legend of Humanica Media. You gotta check out everything going down on their site, humanicamedia.com. Also as well, his channel on YouTube, and all of his great shows, Topicocalypse, What About This, the Super BS Games Cast, and Inside Sports on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and so many other outlets. It is my good friend, Josh Peterson. What's going on, man?
Oh, hello. Hey, I am here ready to podcast. You're in high def today, so that's definitely good. Hey, yeah, so if you're watching this through a Samsung TV or something, you're in luck. You're in for a treat. What's going on, man? How you doing?
I am okay. I'm wishing everybody out there a safe and happy Memorial Day weekend, especially you, my friend. I hope everything's good down in Cali. I just want to make sure everybody out there, again, just has a safe and happy California Memorial Day weekend. Doing all right, man? Just weekend's going good?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's closing in on the end of the old school year here, so I'm just working up a storm here, because that's I guess what teachers do at the end of the year.
Well, I hear you on that because I got two young ladies that are just itching to get out of school. Some of the schools here in Las Vegas area have already gone out. We've got some others finishing off this week, and my girls are definitely so excited to be out for summer very, very soon. Plus, we've got hockey fever, but we'll go into that a little bit later on in the broadcast. It's going to be a great episode we've got for you today because we have Rob McCallum in the middle of the Cosmic Crossfire yet again. He's going to talk about independent movies, independent artists out there when they're making films, and the pressure that's now put on by Netflix because you have to choose between a career in making your independent films for audiences out there in all the theaters and try to see if you can make it out on your own and branch out from there, or try to latch on to another film company, or do you go and sell out to Netflix, or do you just take that big check that Netflix is just dishing out there? We're going to talk more about that coming up in the middle of the Cosmic Crossfire. Plus, also as well, Ben Arnault stops by from the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast. He's going to talk about one of my favorite grilling treats, one of my favorite things to eat, and something that is really underrated out there when it comes to the grilling scene, and that is kebabs. He and I both are on the same wavelength in regards to that, and he's got some great tips on some kebabs that you can make out there at home that are really going to be tasty. And tasty the next time you go barbecuing out there. Hey, even do it when you hear this on Monday. Give it a try. He's going to stop by later as well. And also, coming up later in the broadcast, we've got Jay Bartlett with a review of Solo, a Star Wars story. Jay Bartlett from Star Wars Echo 3 with his review of Solo, a Star Wars story. Speaking of that movie, times may not be good at Lucasfilm and Disney right about now, because Solo, the numbers came in, and Solo, a Star Wars story, actually underperformed everyone's expectations monetarily, not only here domestically in the weekend, but also as well worldwide. It just clearly was not met with overwhelming enthusiasm. It may just barely break $100 million for the 4-day weekend here in the States, and worldwide it may just barely break over 200 million. Not good numbers for something that was projected to go well over that. In fact, 130 to 150 was talked about here in the States, and over 300 worldwide. So that's clearly a downgrade and a disappointment overall. Its cinema score is actually pretty good, about an A-. So people that are going seem to be enjoying it for the most part. Josh, your thoughts on what's going on with Solo? And more importantly, as we break it down even further, could this mean a real shakeup when it comes to the Star Wars anthology series that Star Wars and that Lucasfilm and Disney want to continue, or maybe not after what they saw with Solo?
It's the same thing with A Wrinkle in Time. Disney's competing with themselves. Avengers is still doing pretty solid numbers. You got Deadpool in theaters. Did that sale ever go through with Disney and Fox?
Not yet, and Comcast could still lay a hand in that somewhere as well. So they still might have a dog in that fight. So eventually, by the end of the year, it may end up not even going to Disney after all.
Well, hopefully their movie releases aren't as slow as their internet. But no, Disney is basically, they're competing with themselves, and that's a problem. Like Avengers, a lot of people have there's not a lot of goodwill towards. There is goodwill towards Star Wars, but not as much as there was before Episode 9, and Avengers is still out. So what are if you got, let me ask you this, if you got to choose, if you hadn't seen either of them yet, and you had to pick between seeing Avengers Infinity War and a new Star Wars film, what would you pick?
Well, I think that's an easy question to answer, because of the fact that I've invested, as I've said this before, I've invested so much in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I have to go ahead and say Avengers Infinity War, because I've watched all 18 films prior, and I would be just shorting myself if I didn't actually watch Infinity War at all.
Right. So this is that they're competing with themselves, and like people are going back for, double, triple viewings of Avengers Infinity War. And Solo's not, I guess it got a really bad Rotten Tomato score, but the problem is Disney's just they have too many big movies out at once. If Avengers wasn't out or wasn't still in theaters, I think Solo's numbers would be doing a little bit better. But between the Rotten Tomatoes thing and having Avengers out right now, and just the fan criticism towards what's his name, Alden Emmerich, the guy playing Han Solo.
Alden Ehrenreich.
Yeah, I think this is one of those Star Wars movies or it's one of those movies in general that people are probably just going to wait till it comes out on Redbox to watch. But I want to see it, but I don't, it's just, I don't know, man. And, as for the future of the anthology films, this could, I could be wrong on both those things. This could be, the first case we're seeing of Star Wars burnout, but who knows, man? Maybe they'll have to, plot the next movie at a time when there's not another big movie out, and then see how that does. And if the numbers are still down, then that might be something to these anthology films might be something to reconsider.
You're right. They may have to reevaluate it because I think the disappointment coming with Solo, I think there was a lot of mistakes that they made that you and I have talked about over the past few weeks and months when it comes to this movie. First off, the change in directors was never a good sign, but they did something similar when it came to Rogue One. So it's not exactly uh, earth-shattering that they did something like that because of what they did and as far in what things they did and how much they had to reshoot Rogue One when before it even came out. I also think that they came out with a date way too late in the game for Solo, a Star Wars story. I know. I mean, how many weeks was I saying that I thought it was going to be delayed because they had not yet given a release date for that film?
Yeah, you're saying that for a long time, and just it was rough out the gate because the Lego movie guys that just they that whole thing, when you heard about what their vision for the film was, it made you question in the first place, and they wanted it to be such a spectacle, and the movie was so expensive, all the set pieces so expensive to make that they almost Ron Howard came in, and from what I understand behind the scenes, the movie was almost unsalvageable.
Well, and like I said, that is obviously played into it a little bit, and the negative vibe from that. But even if they did make it as well, 10 times better, 30 times better, 100 times better than what was originally planned with the directors of the Lego movie, what they had envisioned, it's still the fact that they didn't show a trailer until this calendar year, I believe, and then also didn't mention a release date until what 2 months out, pretty much 2 months out, and then also the fact that they, like you said, they are just right on top of each other with a wrinkle in time. They got just bamboozled by by the fact that Black Panther was still week after week scoring it big at the box office. You brought out a wrinkle in time that got kicked to the curb real quick, and it looks like Solo, a Star Wars story, unfortunately will be as well. I'm still going to check it out this week, but you're right. Avengers: Infinity War came out. That also really laid in there too much going on as far as the Disney empire, and then you have Incredibles 2 coming out in about 2 weeks as well. In about 2 weeks, making it even more complicated. Then you have 5 Disney pictures within a span of a little over 3 months. That's not good. That's not good at all. And you have issues when it comes to audiences out there. They just begin to become apathetic. And like you said, there was Star Wars burnout. There was also some fatigue setting in because The Last Jedi didn't perform as well from The Force Awakens. There was a lot of negative feedback when it came to The Last Jedi. I know a lot of people like yourself didn't really care for it at all. I just thought it would have been a better idea if you've already got it made and in the can to just release it in December. I think giving a year buffer time would have been better for that movie. I just thought that they wanted to go ahead and pigeonhole and shoehorn a movie into the Memorial Day weekend because they felt like they had to have it instead of just saying, "Oh wait, okay, Deadpool." Instead of just saying, "Okay, Deadpool, you got that weekend. It's all yours. We'll go ahead still with the leftovers with Avengers: Infinity War and be done and be okay with that. We've got Incredibles 2 on the way." Or even if you really if you were really just so if you're really just so compelled to be on Memorial Day weekend, move up Incredibles 2 to Memorial Day weekend, and you have that there, which is different enough from what you had before, which kind of could have fared a lot better. I think in my opinion, it could have fared a lot better than Solo if you would have put Incredibles 2 in that Memorial Day weekend slot. If you really wanted to put something there, and then just save Solo for the holiday season.
Yeah, see, that was weird to me too that they wanted to put it out so close to the Last Jedi. Star Wars is kind of it's a holiday movie. They should just kind of stick to that yearly release schedule. So, are we getting anything in next year?
We are getting Star Wars Episode 9 at the end of next year. So there will be a year and a half leeway time to Episode 9, which is which is great for J.J. Abrams' project, but for Ron Howard, I think a lot of it was hampered by the fact that you weren't on a yearly basis, and there was still a lot of bad vibes coming from The Last Jedi.
Yeah, and I don't blame any of this on Ron Howard either because he was the cleanup guy. He got put a mess. They put a mess in his hands, and he did the best he could with it. So, I mean, I don't know if it's bad yet. I'm gonna go see it. I'm curious because with this, if the critics all hate this movie, I think there's a high probability that I'm going to like it since the critics all loved Episode 9 and I hated it. So I don't know. Star Wars is weird. I have to go check it out though.
Most of the critics I've listened to and read, they are thinking that it was okay. And that seems to be the running theme as well for the Star Wars movies, which could be another reason why Solo, a Star Wars story, underperformed, was that you have The Force Awakens, you have Rogue One, and you have The Last Jedi. All three were basically rated as average movies. These are not these are not considered high up for the most part on the Star Wars movie chain, on the Star Wars movie ladder. So to me, I just think it's the fact that you bring out okay movies, pretty good movies at best. You're not bringing out those home runs that you had with the original Star Wars or you had with The Empire Strikes Back, and even to some, depending on who you talk to, Return of the Jedi, that you just had that winning combination, and it seems more like it's leaning towards the prequel type quality or the prequel type success, or the thoughts that people have when they were watching and trying to understand what was going on with the prequels as well. So it seems to me like they had a chance to create these stories and make them and polish them and make them acceptable to an audience, or just enjoyable to the audience and memorable enough to the audience as the originals did way back in the 70s and the 80s. But they chose instead to just go ahead and craft them in a way and just, almost like a factory, just put them out put them out year after year after year. And instead you've created I guess a list of just average to above average movies that are, almost in comparison to the prequels, but they haven't really hit those depths yet, because those prequel movies are really bad to most people that you talk to. So I think that's an issue as well. But when it comes right down to it, the Lucasfilm and Disney, obviously the $4 billion is what they see, and they're trying to get their money back as fast as possible to regain and recoup that money as quick as they can. So they felt the need to go ahead and produce Star Wars movies each and every year in order to make up for that, and not realizing that with the Star Wars name and the Star Wars legacy, you can make all this money in a long run that will definitely trounce whatever you paid for the product.
Yeah, I think that what you just said shows a problem in itself, that, the is motivated by money, and that's
When they tell you it's when they tell you it's not about the money, it's about the money.
it is. It's always about the money, and I totally get that because these movies cost so much money to make, and everyone's got to get paid, and then plus, there's got to be a profit on top of that. But it's just, this is the problem, in my opinion, that most Warner Brothers films have, is that every DC film is designed to sell a toy or to sell a T-shirt, or to promote an agenda of some kind. Like, it's all, everything has to be in there. So whoever is writing these scripts or directing these films, like, I don't blame them at all for any of these films being bad, because they got their hands tied. They just got the the execs breathing so heavy down their neck. I always like that Marvel has a little more freedom to do the things that they want, but with big properties like Star Wars, like I don't blame the movies being bad on the direct, except I do blame Rian Johnson for what he did to Star Wars Episode 9. But that's neither here nor there. But
Yeah, episode 8, right?
Episode 8, yeah. But I mean, money, 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 man.
Money,
It,
money, money, money,
yeah, I think
money.
right. I think it's gonna be a long time until we get a Star Wars that feels original and gritty, and I'm hoping that the guys from Game of Thrones are gonna be able to deliver something like that.
Can you just say DC for me real quick? Because that came out lagged.
DC.
Sweet. Okay. All right. Well, and then, so where does that leave this anthology series? We've seen the poor performance of Solo, A Star Wars Story, this weekend. Again, it's first world problems because it did garner around $100 million for a 4-day weekend. A lot of movies would love to do that, but to a Star Wars, Disney conglomerate, Lucasfilm, that whole entity, yeah, obviously it did not perform anywhere close to what it did to where it should have. I want to ask you this: where does this leave this? Hold on. I want to ask you this, Josh. Where does this leave the Star Wars anthology series as a whole? Because we've talked about in past episodes what may be upcoming, including Ian McGregor coming back in an Obi-Wan story. Everybody was talking right around the premiere of the solo movie. Everybody was talking about a Lando movie possibly. And then we got word this past week that James Mangold, the director of Logan, which was such a great movie last year, was hired to pen and also direct possibly a Boba Fett movie as well. So where does this leave the Star Wars saga in regards to these anthology series? I think it leaves it on shaky ground because, as you and I have seen over the course of our years, trying to understand the movie industry, all it takes is one movie that performs horribly at the box office to change opinions in the movie industry all around when it comes to how they foresee a series. Remember last year with The Mummy and the Dark Universe that Universal had planned, all it took was the Mummy just tanking at the box office, and the whole Dark Universe seemed to have been tanked. There's been rumors it might be brought back up again, but for the most part, it's been really quiet when it comes to the Dark Universe.
Yeah, it's because honestly, like, here's the thing: nobody wanted the anthology films in the first place. No Star Wars fan was like, I want to see what happens. This Rogue One was really good, but they, it's
I
everyone.
kind of disagree with you on that. Rogue One to me was kind of a type film to me. I place, in my opinion, I place The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and Rogue One all right around each other as far as interest level for me is concerned. For me, it sounds like you enjoyed it. From what I remember in our conversations, you liked it a lot more than I did.
I didn't walk out hating it. I went in, I got a story, I got a complete story. It's not a film that I wanted to see, but at the same time, I don't regret watching it. But Star Wars has always done a really good job of telling you in their mainline entries what happened at these points in time. And they talk enough about it that you don't feel the need to go back and feel like, oh man, I would love to see this happen. I'd love to see that. Like people saying, I'd love to see Yoda movie, Yoda training, with the other Yodians or whatever they're called. I don't need
Yeah.
like that's enough for me. All they got to do is mention it in the movie and that's it. I don't need to see like an anthology film. So yeah, like a Boba Fett, we talked about this Boba Fett. I could care less about a Boba Fett movie. And like I even put out on Facebook the other night, like, why do people like Boba Fett? And nobody actually gave me a good answer. So they just want to make it's a money thing. The anthology films are not, I don't think they're made as much for Star Wars fans as much as they are just to fill the coffers over at Disney.
Well, I heard this week. Well, I was listening to different podcasts this week already with various opinions on Solo and the whole anthology series as a whole. And one thing that was mentioned that was passed out on one of the shows, I think it was the Mothership, if I remember correctly, that these anthology series would have been better placed over the course of a TV series. Now we both know that Jon Favreau has been commissioned to start going through a Star Wars episodic TV series to be put out into either the new Disney streaming service or one of the Disney channels, what have you. That a Solo anthology could have been a great series. It could have been a great season. You just tell the story of Solo over the course of a 10 to 12 episode season. Boom, you're done. Then you go on to Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, and so on. I think it probably would have been more effective, and you would have reached the same type of audience that is interested in these anthology stories, as opposed to trying always mass market it and hope that a large audience is actually interested just because it tacks on the Star Wars name somewhere in the title.
Right. And yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. You said it great. But and two, like, this is going to create Star Wars burnout. Like, it really is. I know a lot of people who are just, there was a time when people be jumping at the chance to see a new Star Wars movie, but now, like, in the years since The Force Awakens came out, it's just the amongst my peer group, the excitement to see it has just gone lower and lower and lower. And now, like, instead of my friends calling me up and going, "Hey, let's go see this opening night," it's just like, "Hey, yeah, let's just go see it whenever everybody's free," and that's what's going to continue to happen.
But Avengers Infinity War was different, wasn't it?
Yep, the Avengers Infinity War is different because they're, yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's different, but
Sorry. Well, it's different because, like I said, there's a lot of interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and also the fact that there's like you and I have both been invested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe over the course of now 18, 19 films, and it's just something that we are currently just involved in so many different aspects because things have taken place so recently. With the Star Wars universe, it started in 1977. It started when I was 8. So a lot of people don't have that attachment. And I'm now hearing more and more when I'm out there or when I'm watching television of people that are saying, I've never seen a Star Wars movie. I've never understood the Star Wars references. So you're seeing that more often because they're not sure at all, or they haven't been interested in it. And it's not just a millennials thing. It's just the fact that over the course of time, and the prequels were really an issue because they were made to be so unwatchable at given points in time that a lot of people just didn't want to carry on with the Star Wars series during the 90s when it came out and early 2000s. And then you have also as well, and then you have you have everybody being cited for The Force Awakens, $2 billion later. That excitement seems to have worn off because of the fact that it was such a long time since people were actually excited over going to see a Star Wars movie. And once that aura is gone, now you just have year after year Star Wars movie, the cookie cutter type deals. So I agree with you on the fact that it looks like it's just a money grab at this point in time. And the freshness and wonder and spectacle that is Star Wars seems to have gone away, at least for now, while Marvel still has that magic, at least at this point in time. Will it have it after the Infinity War Part 2 or whatever it is they're going to call it next year? That I'm not so sure. We could see Marvel burnout, and that so many people have speculated on at that whatever whenever that next phase begins. But at least for now, people are excited for Marvel. But as we can see with Solo, a Star Wars story, people are not excited at all about the Star Wars universe at this point in time.
yeah, and it's going to be even worse for the Boba Fett movie. Everyone on the internet's talking about how much they'd love to see a Boba Fett movie, but They're
I'm not excited to see it.
yeah, but you look at the articles on the internet and like the comment boxes and stuff, people seem to be pretty stoked about it. But I guarantee you, much like all the people who complain about politics on Facebook who don't go out and vote, this is what's going to happen. A lot of people are like, "Yeah, I love the idea of a Boba Fett movie," but they're not going to go out and watch it.
I don't think a Boba Fett movie. I think a Boba Fett movie would actually make less than Solo because not only is he not as recognizable, I think he's more like a cult hero to a lot of people. I think he's more like a cult hero to a select few that absolutely love him, and to so many others, they don't even have any idea who he is. Or oh yeah, it's that guy that got thrown into that pit with the pit monster, which is the Sarlacc and all that, but to the general Star Wars audience or the general casual audiences that are out there watching or thinking about a Star Wars film, Boba Fett doesn't come to mind. Obi-Wan might because Ian McGregor is a recognizable face, but then again, who we surrounded Solo with recognizable faces, and that didn't seem to work as well.
True, but I mean, I want to see Solo before I'm able to say, whether or not it's a good or bad movie. But yeah, no, we'll see, man. And like I honestly like I don't have any interest in seeing a Lando Calrissian movie. I know you guys are talking about how that'd be cool, but like it's a novel idea, but it's just one of those things where we, like I said earlier, we get enough backstory for a lot of these characters in the main trilogy where we don't need it. We don't need to see if they feel the need to really expand on someone's story, that's what the books and comic books are for.
Or TV series. I think it would go great, like I said, in an episodic TV show.
No, I completely agree. So I don't know what they're it's money, it's money. At the end of the day, it's money. But the hope I guess would be that they don't beat it to death before they come out with something that truly reinvigorates Star Wars as we know it.
That might be a long time coming. You do have Rian Johnson, who again, his work was not so beloved when it comes to Last Jedi. Yes, it scored over $1.5 billion, but there was so much divisiveness on social media when it comes to The Last Jedi. A lot of your angst and a lot of your disappointment in Star Wars and a lot of your apathy that you're starting to get when it comes to the Star Wars saga came from The Last Jedi, did it not?
Yeah, it did. They just, it was. I can go into detail about this, but it might take a while. But I'll just say that it kind of dismantled all the reasons that I like everything I liked about Star Wars. It sort of dismantled it. So in nonsensical storytelling, and it wasn't so much like they're trying something new. I respect that, but it's just there was the way that the movie wrapped up just made the whole thing seem pointless. Like two bickering families that just got into a fight so large that it expanded over the entire universe.
Thor Ragnarok killed off a lot of the stuff that was in Thor 1 and Thor 2, but we as the audience didn't have that emotional attachment to it as much. So we weren't as bothered by it, but also the movie itself was pretty good for the most part. So it kind of made up for that fact. The Last Jedi killed off a lot of what we liked and what held special for so many years when it comes to the Star Wars universe. So I can understand why a lot of people have a lot of issues when it comes to The Last Jedi. And Rian Johnson making his own Star Wars universe after Episode 9, and also the Game of Thrones writers doing their own universe, doing their own universe as well. I'm hoping one of those two universes will actually connect with audiences, but things aren't looking so rosy anymore for Star Wars, for the Star Wars universe, especially after the disappointment that is Solo, a Star Wars story. What are your thoughts on Solo, a Star Wars story? Did you go watch it? Did you enjoy it? We'd love to hear your feedback on it. Or are you just tired of the Star Wars series and was Solo a bad idea? It's beginning to look a lot. It's beginning to look a lot like Solo was indeed a bad idea for Lucasfilm and Disney. Share us your thoughts. popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanity Media, and Game Source on Facebook and Twitter as well. Jay Bartlett will be by later in the show to review Solo, a Star Wars story. So hopefully he can change some of these negative vibes with some positivity on how he feels about the movie itself. Also, we've got coming up very soon is Rob McCallum in the middle of the Cosmic Crossfire talking about Netflix trying to buy up a lot of the independent movie scene and the resistance that comes along with it. And then also Ben Arnault from the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast. He's going to tell us about the wonders of grilling kebabs, and you're missing out if you're not grilling yourself some good kebabs. He's got a couple ideas that you might want to hear this because they are definitely a delicious sounding recipe. So look out for that coming up. Listen for that coming up later in the program as well. We've got a lot going on for you. Plus, at the end, on the back end, Josh and I are going to be talking about the rise and fall of the creator of this game series right here. I'm wearing on this shirt right now. It is Gears of War. It is Cliff Basinski. He has undergone a little bit of some hard times, and later on in the show, we're going to reflect on some of his good and not so good as far as what's going on in the world in the rise and fall of Cliffy B. All this and a lot more. Hope you're sticking around with us. We truly appreciate it. This is the Pop Culture Cosmos. Coming up next, we've got Ben Arnault of the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast talking kebabs. This is the Pop Culture Cosmos. Coming up next, it's Jay Bartlett from Star Wars Echo 3 and Galaxy of Hope talking, reviewing Solo, a Star Wars story. This is the Pop Culture Cosmos. And we're back to close out the show. This is Gerald Glassford. This is the Pop Culture Cosmos. This is Gerald thanking you so much for sticking around and enjoying the program. Thanks so much to Rob McCallum for being in the middle of Cosmic Crossfire, Jay Bartlett for reviewing Solo, a Star Wars story, and of course Ben Arnault telling us some great recipes on making some great kebabs, not only this weekend, not only this Memorial Day weekend, but also in the future for this summer when you're going out and grilling. Don't forget kebabs because they can truly make the party worthwhile for you. Josh, before we head on out, I've been dying to talk about this subject because there's some things I wanted to talk about recently when it comes to the creator of Gears of War, and that's Cliff Basinski. How much are you familiar with his work, and how big a fan were you in regards to the Gears of War series?
I was a fan of the Gears of War series, but I wasn't really that big into any of his other projects. I know Lawbreakers was supposed to be a big thing, and we checked that out at E3 last year, but it was never something I wanted to pick up. And then, poor guy having that game come out in the midst of all the battle royale stuff. But yeah, it's tragic. It just goes to show you the video game industry is it's just not what it used to be. But what are your thoughts on him?
Well, to give everybody an update on what's going on, the reason why he's actually the topic of our conversation is he recently closed down his studios. He recently closed down his studio, Radical Heights, which, like you said, was the creator of his recent game Lawbreakers, and just unfortunately, Lawbreakers just did not connect with an audience. His studio, he just closed down because just wasn't working at all. And like you said, with Fortnite, with H1Z1, with PUBG, and most importantly, with the game that it tried to most emulate in Overwatch, it just couldn't compete with it. It just was like you said, it just was not a game that was going to be able to connect with a large audience. It wasn't going to be able to attract a large audience, and it just didn't work out for him. I mean, this is something that he was obviously very sad about. He's now in retirement. He's trying to get out of the game scene for now. I'm sure there will be some temptations to come back at some point in time, but this was a failure of massive proportions because of what he was doing with Epic Games, and obviously what he was doing with the Gears of War series that he left. And I will tell you a story because I remember, and the reason why I prefaced this with saying that it's the rise and fall of Cliffy B is because he was on cloud nine for a while with the success of the Gears of War series. It became such a massive success as a third person over the shoulder shooter, one of the first of its type that utilized its technique and its gameplay. It was just so awesome to not only go through the cool campaigns that it went through, especially the original, but also the formats in not only Gears of 1, 2, but Gears of War 3 is from a multiplayer standpoint. The actual interaction that you would have, the co-op, and also the team based type of gameplay that you had. It was just truly a great time. Gears of War 2 created the Horde mode, which became a craze in and of itself. He was on cloud nine, making a lot of money, and being a rock star in the video game industry. I remember I was with Angry Nick during E3 2009, I believe it was E3 2009 or 2010. It just E3s just roll into each other seemingly, and we were just sitting there on the floor. We were just tired after a long day of going around and checking out all the games that were out there. And I think we were near I think we were near the Activision booth because there's Call of Duty, just some Call of Duty something was just blaring all over the place. We're just sitting down on the floor, and here he comes walking by, arm in arm with, I don't know if his girlfriend or wife, but it was beautiful blonde that he had arm in arm, just carrying him, and he's just walking down this road with the biggest grin on his face, like, okay, looking at all of us like we were just, I don't know if he was just looking at us with disdain or just looking at us like, this was, you guys were the lives I once had, and this is the life I have now. The sports cars, the rock star image, the beautiful women, et cetera, et cetera. And it just seemed like he was on a cloud nine. Now, I'm sure all of that was deserved because the fact to make a quality product such as the Gears of War series, you obviously him and Rod Ferguson had to have come up with something that was based off a lot of hard work and a lot of great programming and a lot of great and a great team that was behind them both. So be that as it may, he obviously deserved the success that was warranted to him. But I just remember that when I was reading the fact that when I was reading the news that he was retiring or closing closing up his studio Radical Heights, and just remembering just I don't know, I guess just the good times that he had. I know Colin Campbell of Polygon made an article similar to what I'm talking about when he was on late night talk shows, on in news everywhere, and all the big star that he was becoming. And like I said, I remember that period of time when he was just on such a high of highs, and he felt like in the industry he was the king of kings. And unfortunately, he's just had a sharp fall. Some of the decisions were based off the marketplace. Some of the decisions were on his own, but are on him because he made some movements, leaving Epic Games, shooting out on his own, opening up his own studio and things of that nature that really didn't pan out. So obviously that some of that is on him, but it's still, nonetheless, I'm still sad to see somebody that reached such a high has now reached such a low. And I'm hopeful that he can actually get back in the industry and produce quality material once again in the video game industry. So nothing I'm trying to say is mean spirited, my friend, but I just, I just remember that period of time when he was just thinking he was the what, and unfortunately at this point of time he's no longer the what.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Gears of War was announced, when the premiere trailer came on. there was a long time, you're right, when the only name you were really hearing was Cliff Bleszinski. It was much like when, in BioShock, you heard about Ken Levine for a really long time, and then, Cliff Bleszinski, like, he was on top of the world, and he changed the third-person shooter genre with Gears of War, and that was amazing, but then, I think we get more and more into these situations where these devs, like, you hear about even the devs of, like, God of War or, what was the other franchise I was just thinking
Oh,
of?
Ken, what's his name?
Ken Levine. Sorry, my dog's barking.
Not, oh, yeah, you had Ken Levine of BioShock, but you also had David Jaffe of God of War or Twisted Metal.
I don't know. I know Cory Barlog's always been tied to God of War, but you have a lot of these devs, especially with sorry, hold on one second.
Because David Jaffe also has hit hard times. He did have the bust known as Drawn to Death that was exclusive on PS4. That busted last year. We've also seen Ken Levine and what happened with the BioShock series and how his career kind of actually, I don't want to say fizzled out, but it's certainly not at the place where it once was.
But he still got a whole lot of goodwill from his fans, though.
This is true. This is true. He didn't create that one monumental bomb like Cliff Bleszinski did with Lawbreakers. So I guess there's that for. But you say that these developers, like when the video game industry was rising in 2006, 2007, 2008, and all these memorable games that we have now, the Uncharted series, the Mass Effect series, the Gears of War series, Halo series, was really on a big high. The developers were actually promoted alongside the games as rock stars, as the people to go to in the industry. And now it seems that at this point it's petered off a little bit, and it's the emphasis is more on the actual games themselves. Could I be wrong in saying that?
No, but we're also facing a problem where there is a decline in, the types of games that these guys were made famous for, and that's another factor that needs to be taken into consideration, but, um,
Well,
yeah.
it's also because the video game industry is cyclical, that it just always seems to be changing and evolving. And if you don't change and evolve with it, then you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, and I think a big problem is too, you hear a lot about these developers not wanting to be hog tied or tied to a series. Like you have the stories of the guys who made BioShock, not BioShock, the doctors who made Mass Effect. And you have the stories of the guys behind.
I've got another story from that same E3 in regards to them, but I'll save that for another day.
I know. I wonder if those guys got to like hang on to the franchise, what they would have done with it. But you hear the story, same thing with the devs of Uncharted and the devs of Metal Gear Solid, and you have the guys who made the team behind God of War. It's just it's they don't want to be tied to these series unless they can make them feel fresh again, and a lot of times it's hard to do that.
Well, right now we have PUBG, we have Fortnite, and those two games are really striking it rich and striking it hot, but we don't really have a face behind those games. We only have the studios that are making those games. Epic Games, which with Fortnite, which is that's becoming more famous, but there's no real name or face attached to it that's becoming famous alongside with it. So it's more about the studios or the companies that are producing these games and less about the individuals themselves that are making it at this point in time. Back in the older days, 10 years ago or whatnot, we were actually focusing and highlighting the actual individuals that were most prominently involved in creating these games. Hudson for Mass Effect, like you said, and also for the Bethesda, what's his name for the Fallout series?
Wait, who are you asking?
The major Todd Howard. Todd Howard for Bethesda. Like I said, Hudson for BioWare, and also Amy Hennig for Naughty Dog at that point in time. yeah, those individuals, they were like rock stars, and then things have changed and evolved where it's more about the actual studio and what they're presenting at this point in time. So I think that's a better thing for me. To lay in our society at this point in time with social media, the emphasis on one individual, there would be just anytime anything went wrong would be the blame goes all to them. And in the social media world, that's not exactly the greatest thing to have. So I'm glad to see things have evolved in the video game industry that have worked out better for fans out there to follow studios rather than just people. I know there's a couple, obviously, there's a couple of developers out there that still put themselves out in the forefront. We know this. We follow them still at this point in time. But for the most part, with every new game that hits now, it seems to be more about the studio rather than the individual. So I think that's better because there's a whole team of individuals and not just one person responsible for making these games.
Yeah, I agree, but sometimes it does take one person's creative vision to get other people going because you have and I have a lot of respect for the storytellers in video games because I think that's where the real craft comes from, unless it's a multiplayer centric game. But it's a lot of moving pieces all at once. Everyone deserves their due credit, and especially if you're working for a company like Bethesda, because from what I understand, you go and they work on these games for months at a time, and they don't spend a lot of time with their families. So it's a commitment and it's a craft and it's definitely an art.
Casey Casey Hudson from BioWare. Casey Hudson from BioWare. Got that. Okay. So, like I said, it's a shame what's happened to Cliff Brzezinski, but unfortunately, at this point in time, that's the way the video game industry is. You're on a highs of high at one point in time, but easily with the wrong game or the wrong moves made, it can actually also be the lowest of lows. What are your thoughts on Cliff Brzezinski leaving the video game scene? Are you, do you have fond memories of the Gears of War series and what he created? Did you actually enjoy Lawbreakers? And sorry to see it go. Cliff Brzezinski closing down Radical Heights. Is that something that you were sad in seeing go? And would you like to see would you like to see Cliffy B rejoin the video game world once again? Share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos at yahoo.com, popculturecosmos, Humanica Media, and Game Source, and Humanica Media on Facebook and Twitter as well. Josh, before we head on out, want to make sure and let everyone know our shows are being streamed 7 days a week on online radio and that we deliver 2 brand new shows covering the latest in pop culture every Monday and Friday to Apple Podcasts or our over 30 different podcast networks. So just subscribe to any one of them on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel to get extra content we throw up there, not only from me, but also from Josh's great stuff, his old library of podcasts, and also fresher stuff as well he puts up on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel. But you can also, to get the latest info, check out that Pop Culture Cosmos Facebook or Twitter pages for our entire radio schedule and a list of those podcast networks. And don't forget what you heard earlier. If you love the grilling, like we're talking about with the kebabs and all that, what goes better on kebabs than a nice barbecue sauce, barbecue seasonings? And if you're doing some ribs, you can go for some nice barbecue rubs as well. WheelieQ.com, they've got the great stuff for you. And if you just put in POD1 Pod 1 at checkout, that's 15% off your order. Oh my gosh, what a deal. What a deal. Josh, before we head on out, what you got cooking with Humanica Media, my friend?
There's a new Topicocalypse going up tomorrow morning, and then a new episode of Super BS on Thursday. And then you can also check out a new episode of Inside Sports right now. Actually, just went up earlier this afternoon. So definitely do that if you're looking on hearing some predicts on the NHL Stanley Cup final.
Speaking of which, we have got to do our own stuff But you got to check out first Humanica. But I got to let you know Humanica Media on Facebook, Humanica Media on YouTube, and of course all the great shows that he was talking about on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and so many other amazing podcast networks. We got to talk about the Stanley Cup because I'm in Vegas and everybody's rocking the highs of highs. It's coming out this week, the Stanley Cup. They're facing off against the Washington Capitals. No caps, as we say here. Hashtag no caps. In fact, even the signage and everybody's going, no caps. They're actually just all small letters at this point in time. So your thoughts quickly on the Stanley Cup. Do you think Ovechkin and the Caps are going to do it, or do you think the Cup's going to be won by the Golden Knights?
Honestly, at this point, I've stopped making predictions because this is absolutely insane. Nothing. All of the sports analysts were wrong. Every single sports analyst was wrong. So at this point, it's really anybody's game. Ovechkin wants it, but if they don't get it this season, I don't think he's ever going to end up with that ring. It's too bad too because TJ Oshie is actually he's been pretty far into the playoffs before, and he's a great player, but he just gets drowned out by Ovechkin, unfortunately. My question is, if there's I'm hearing a lot of conspiracy theories too about this, the Vegas draft, but that's another topic for another time. But
I was there, and it didn't seem like a conspiracy to me. So I was there in the arena. We were just excited. Hey, the rules are what they are. They made some good moves. Pittsburgh wanted to dump a lot of money, and they dumped Fleury. They literally handed the Golden Knights Fleury and a second round draft pick just to take them off their hands. So nobody's got to, the league and the teams that left these players unprotected, those are the ones actually to blame.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens because in 2020 they're at Seattle's adding they're doing another expansion draft in Seattle to even out the number of teams in the league. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, back to the Vegas thing. Yeah, my question is, I wonder if, assuming they win, hindsight should have put money on Vegas, but
500 to 1, my friend. 500 to 1.
Right. But assuming that they win, what is next season going to look like? Because there are a bunch of dudes out there with a lot to prove. Is that fire going to be gone next season? So we'll see what happens.
Well, like I've said before, this excitement that has been created has now given the fans goodwill for at least 4 to 5 years. I'm going to tell you that right now. This has been unlike anything I've ever seen here. People just have talked in hindsight about the UNLV Rebels, the Running Rebels in the 1990s being closest thing they've ever seen to a phenomenon of any type of athletic team here in the city. And just to see the whole community, after the tragedy we suffered in October, to see that type of camaraderie and people just everywhere just rooting for them. People you see in your normal day and walk in life that have no clue about hockey, that just don't have any clue or would not be or don't look like or probably don't even know anything really about hockey are wearing these shirts, are wearing these jackets, are putting the stickers on their car. They're doing the whole flag deal and all that. Okay, it might be a little bit overblown, but it is reality. Vegas has got Golden Knights fever, and it's just great to see. I'm actually picking the Golden Knights. I'm gonna pick them in 7. I think it's going to be a great series, and I think I'm just happy for the city after what's happened. Yes, they made a lot of great moves that I know a lot of people are questioning, but for the long term, it's just a great win for the city, even if they just are mediocre the next 3 or 4 years, because the fact that now they have a fan base that's interested in their product, which they didn't have when they started up. They had a hard time even getting the 10,000 seat agreement just so they could become an expansion team. They were really struggling to get people buying in, and people and a lot of individuals like myself that had been here a long time thought the casinos were going to have to bail them out with buying up tickets and all that just in order to have them break even. But my goodness, we've all been proven wrong. In fact, the only person that I know, the only analyst I know that actually picked the Golden Knights to go all the way in the playoffs was Linda Cohn of ESPN, so she must have known something nobody else did. But even at this case, the Golden Knights, who have the better record, are still the underdog going in. I'm going with the Golden Knights. You look like you're favoring the Capitals because if Ovechkin doesn't do it now, like you said, he may never do it.
Yeah, it was his last chance, I think. You know, they've never gotten this far, so it'll be these are two teams that have never, well, obviously Vegas hasn't, but the Washington Ovechkins have not made it to the Stanley Cup final either. So it'll be interesting either way. We'll see what happens though.
We will, and it'll be a great series indeed, either which way. But I'm just going to say this. I'm going to finish this off, even though I was originally a Kings fan, but I tell you what, I'm going over and been rooting for them for the past few weeks and months now, and I think it's just great to see this community come together over it. And I will say, on behalf of the city of Las Vegas, go Knights, go! So for Josh Peterson, this is Gerald Glassford. It's another beautiful day right here. It's another beautiful day in paradise right here in the pop culture cosmos. We thank you for listening. And here's hoping you have yourself a great day.